Hey YouTube, welcome back to another History Teacher Reacts video. Mr. Terry as I continue my search for historical knowledge found here on the internet. Alright, I hope you all had a great holiday season and ready to move into 2021. Now what we're doing here today is headed back to the Extra History series on the Inca Empire. So we have checked out episodes 1 and 2, and we are now going to begin episode 3 of this 4-part series. So this episode is called Life of a Dead Emperor. Now this is fascinating because there was this belief, if you remember going back, that someone that's a dead, a leader, is still technically kind of seen as a ruler from beyond the grave. An interesting part of their culture, and I'm interested to learn more about that. Maybe they say a little bit about why or what they felt this ruler could, do, I guess, as a dead leader. But this has been great, and I'm definitely looking forward to watching more of this. All right, if you have not subbed to Extra History, they're amazing. One of my favorite channels on the internet, and they have a ton of topics in this small, awesome mini-series format. So make sure you sub over to them, check out all their videos, and give it view time, all the support they need, because they're one of the best ones out here. All right, and down below there's some links to some other things if you'd like to get involved in our community, Discord, Teespring, my gaming channel, a bunch of other fun things. All right, let's go ahead and get started.
Cusco. Tupa
Capital.
Inca Yupanqui has come to visit his father, Pachacuti, for dinner. Tupa Inca
Founder
sits
of the
in his
empire.
father's house, drinking his chicha beer and partaking of food. They talk about the old times, about the state of the empire, and share tobacco. Halfway through,
Good
they
old
get up
days.
to relieve themselves before settling in for a second round. Finally, Tupa Inca begs his leave. The hour has grown late. He tells his father they must meet again, this time at Tupa Inca's residence. Perhaps his father will visit him at his estate in the mountains. It's a perfectly normal visit between father and son. Except for one, small thing. Both men are dead. Yeah, they have been for decades. These are mummies.
Amazing how, you have this culture where death is not like, it's not a drastic thing. It's like, yeah, you're dead, but you're still around. You still have influence. You can still almost communicate. Amazing a culture like that. What other cultures do you guys know of that have this level of, I don't know, whatever you call it, an interaction with your dead? Right? Do you know of any that have that kind of thing where it's just like, if someone's dead, it's just like they're living. You commune, you have a relationship. Are there any others like that? Put it in the comments.
Still fulfilling social obligations as they did in life. And this was a dinner party for the dead.
It's a dead man's party. Who could ask for more?
We're in a strange place in the century-long history of the
Strange
Inca
things.
Empire. Apart from a few territorial gains, most of its establishment and expansion has already occurred. The current Sapa Inca, Huayna Capac, rules the empire at the height of its power.
I do this with my students when we talk about Inca leaders and Incan government positions. It has all the names, right? And the Inca words, they're pretty complicated and can be kind of difficult. And I freak out my students every time and go, okay, just so you know, we're having a spelling test on our next test for Inca government positions. And they're like, I say, just kidding.
But Huayna Capac will be the last uncontested emperor of the Inca. Yet before we discuss its fall, let's take a moment and examine the empire at
Power
its height,
struggles?
how it
That never
operated,
happens.
and what life was like. Because this is one of the most unique societies in history, and it's worth dropping in on a day in the life of the Inca Empire. So, our day begins not in the capital of Cusco, but in the conquered city of Quito in modern Ecuador. And it starts with a party. Thousands of people crowd the plaza, laughing, eating, drinking chicha beer, and staring at the Incas who have just thrown this lavish feast. Because this is no ordinary party.
No?
It's the feast before the labor tithe. Among the crowd sits one man, not an Inca, but a local of Quito. He's a father, a husband, a brother, and an artisan. But to the Inca, he is a not.
Yeah.
See, a few
A
years
quipu.
ago, he married, which to the Inca makes him both a full person and a part of the imperial labor pool. The Inca's worldview is based on complementary pairs, man and woman, sun and moon, one who breaks ground, and one who sows seeds. And this means someone is not a member of society until they form a household. Not to mention, a married man can leave his home for months at a time, doing labor service,
he has
while
to.
his wife cares for his home and fields.
So if you remember, going back, if you hadn't seen the other videos, the Inca don't have like a monetary system in the traditional sense that you would think of, but they do have a taxation system. So what they do is instead of you giving money, is you give back in products or services. And some towns, they grew certain things like certain crops or had a specific skill set. But then again, also you might have to spend a part of your year going out of your town to work in another city to work on temples or maybe roads or something like that. It was the mita system, and it was pretty productive for them, again, without having like a monetary system, to be able to get something back. And everybody was a part of it. Like I said, I didn't know though that you had to be married to do that. So it's like, it looks like that's more like full citizenship when you're married. And then again, the husband and the wife are both expected to do something for their service back to the community.
The year before, a census taker had come to the man's valley, recording on a knotwork quipu how many households existed and what each person did.
If you don't remember, again, it's been a while, quipu is the closest thing I had to a writing system. You can see him holding this system of its strings, and then there's knots in the strings. And the idea is that the location, I think, amount of the knots records a certain thing that you want to keep track of. I don't know exactly like what their, I don't know what you'd call their version of an alphabet or a numeric system would look like with these quipu knots, but pretty fascinating. Again, a thing where you have this empire that's like 3,000 miles in length without a communication, like a written communication system, but is still able to have news and keep records and have a taxation system. It really is an amazing thing about the Inca Empire.
In the empire, people are sorted by age, sex, and the kind of work they can perform. He counted elderly men who couldn't walk, separate from those who could. He listed little boys as young as 4 as trap setters, and their sisters as gatherers. He counted women old enough to carry burdens, and others who were physically or mentally disabled. Though the man farms most of the year, due to the Inca's insistence that all households must be self-sufficient in food production, his people are particularly talented goldsmiths. And that's likely what he and 9 other households in his group will do for the empire.
Makes sense.
Because the empire works in base 10. The goldsmith is counted as one of 10 households of goldsmiths
that's right,
that
I've seen
report
this.
to a local leader. And that leader, along with 9 others, report to a man
100
who's
and
in
then to
charge
1,000.
of marshaling those 100 households. And it goes on like that up to groups of 10,000. Each has its own leader, most of them local, that report to the Inca representatives who live in Quito or the way stations on the Inca Road.
Yeah, there's a system going all the way to the Inca himself, who is what the name kind of the emperor was, the top person. So yeah, it's like, yeah, you have your leader of your household, which is your patriarch, your father figure, male figure, and then you have your community, right? And you have somebody that's in charge of like 10 households, 100 households. It goes all the way up. You have the Inca himself, and then below that, I think there's like 4 provinces, and then there's one person of each province, and then within that, 10,000. It's a pretty interesting chain of command that basically everybody has somebody that they are responsible for in equal numbers, and you report to that person and that sort of thing.
Thus can 100,000 Inca, mostly living in Cusco, rule over 10 million people. But not always easily. This feasting masks attention. Quito is a new addition to the Inca Empire. And though the man can see some benefits, such as having more food than
Was
his
it called
ancestors
Quito
did,
then?
and the empire had improved security by stopping regional warfare, locals don't like the imposed sun god worship, resent the labor tax, and still feel the effects of the forced relocations. When the Inca came, they divided the land and llama herds into 3 parts, taking one for the Inca aristocracy, one for their priests, and finally gifting that last third to the locals for sustenance. When the crops failed, people went hungry. An Inca official steps up, calling for silence. He reads out the assignments. A division of stonemasons will repair the stretch of road between 2 peaks. Another will fix the emperor's local terraces. The weavers, the Inca's most prized and privileged artisans, will make clothing for the Inca aristocrats. The potters, the least prized, will manufacture bowls and pots.
So you can tell they're not going to like this. They would rather, and they liked making stuff for their community, right? Communally, the people that you know in your area. But they feel like they're just getting stuff taken away, not for their community, but for the elite. And you could see where that might begin to, make some people unhappy with how things are governed.
Some will be assigned military service, And for the man and his goldsmiths, he will make gold and silver ritual objects destined for Cusco. The man and his group take the Inca Road to a nearby way station that includes storehouses, workshops, and temporary housing. And Inca officials issue him the materials he needs, as well as a portion of food to sustain him through the crafting of the 3 golden llamas he now owes the Inca rulers. The sooner he finishes this task, the sooner he can return home. But he knows the Inca covet fine objects, so he takes his time and does it right. When he's done, he hands the objects over to a courier and makes his way home. This courier is doing his service as well, running parcels up and down the Inca Road. But he only runs one segment, from a single way station to another, before he hands the llama off to another runner who takes the next leg. During his service...
So yeah, remember, they don't have animals, riding animals. They don't have anything that in the Americas. There's no horses or anything. So everything was done by foot, and everything was carried, backpack or something like that, because you didn't have those kind of animals. The llama was the best domesticated animal, but they're slow. You can't really ride them or anything like that. But yeah, these people had to do this, and there's just basically professional runners who literally would run on these roads and these stations. But I mean, it was fairly efficient for what you could do. It's pretty much the fastest thing humanly possible of all of these types of networks.
This teenage boy has carried quipu messages, precious small objects, and even a fish caught fresh off the coast, destined for the Emperor's plate in Cusco. Through this system, an object can make it from Quito to Cusco in 3 days, a distance of over 1,000 miles.
That's impressive.
One of these golden llamas is destined to be united with a teenage girl.
Wow.
A very special teenage girl.
Who dat?
Whose father has volunteered her for a great honor.
What?
To be sacrificed. Human sacrifice is common in the Empire, but generally on a small scale. And this girl, now traveling the road, dressed in fine garments and carried on a litter, is not afraid.
Does she know? She's like, oh, if I can play with the gold llama for a while, it's okay. Does she know? Did I miss that?
She and the teenage boy she's paired with will spend their final year in luxury. Her family will be rewarded. And after a year, the two will marry and go to a ceremony in the mountains. There, they'll drink chicha until they pass out, whereupon they'll be strangled, bludgeoned, and buried as an offering to the sun and moon.
Okay. You're going to kill him. So, strangle and bludgeon. So that means they're going to get, choked and then hit. I've always wondered with some of these cultures that have done this, why the painful types of killings? I heard that with like with Vikings, when the chief would die, they would get a servant girl to basically die with him, and they would like stab her and beat her up. Why don't they just like try to make it painless? Is it make it more of a sacrifice if they physically hurt them? I've seen this in multiple cultures that have done some kind of form of human sacrifice.
They will be a complementary pair as the sun and moon are, and they will be buried with the little llama and other gold and silver offerings. Gold the sweat of the sun, and silver the tears of the moon. She does not fear this fate, however, for death is not an ending, but merely a transition to
Yeah, I mean,
phase.
that is true. Actually, I should say that, because, I mean, other than the painful stuff, remember, this is a culture that does not have that barrier between life and death that we often think in the modern era. It's just another form, and you're still very much alive in the community.
The dead are always with the Inca.
Right.
She has herself poured chicha into the grave of her grandmother. And this lesson is reinforced when they pass a royal procession going the opposite way, carrying the mummy of Pachacuti on his way to his son's mountain estate. Now, the dead emperor has a surprisingly active social life. He eats and drinks, his attendants pouring chicha into a channel in the earth. A man urinates on his behalf.
What?
He appears at religious ceremonies at the solstice, and spirit mediums make his will known when the emperor and other officials consult his wisdom. And he retains all his property. His attendants are, in fact, his descendants.
That's crazy. So, okay, if you're the prince and your dad dies, who's the king, you don't get his stuff. What does that mean? You get, actually, I think they said that in the first video, right? The first episode, where it's like, no, you have to keep conquering. That's one of the parts of, I guess, the Inca Empire, and why they become big, is because you don't inherit the property and land of your leader. You have to get new stuff if you're going to rule. So it's almost like never-ending conquest for those families if they want to actually keep their stuff. They just take care of it, but they don't actually get it. And that is a way to fuel empires. Go to like the Assyrian Empire in ancient Mesopotamia. that had in their culture the idea that they had to always be conquering, otherwise their civilization would be destroyed. Their gods would kill them or whatever, like they would lose. They always had to be fighting. So it's like, but something like that can only go so far before you reach your maximum capability of ruling, and then you're going to crumble, right? You can't have a never-ending military conquest complex before it's got to implode, right?
An Inca ruler dies. His entrails are removed and burned, the ashes joining those of his ancestors in a hollow golden statue in the Golden Courtyard. His body is freeze-dried in the Andean air. And much like his body, his power divides as well. His political power goes to his successor, a son chosen by his primary wife. And his primary wife, also his full or half-sister, an arrangement that prevents too many claimants, will become the most influential person in the empire when their son takes the throne. The emperor, on the other hand, chooses a son to run his affairs when he transitions to death. That son and his line will inherit all of the emperor's wealth and estates. Or rather, they will control and run all the wealth on behalf of the deceased emperor, who will continue going about his life. After all,
wait, so does that mean they can't use it? Can't spend it? Can't live there? Like, what's the difference between running their stuff and really having their stuff and being able to use their stuff?
Is not an ending. Pachacuti's spirit is still alive, vital, and powerful in his mummy and in the sacred landscape. So, his attendants carry him to the mountain estate, which he engineered to complement the beautiful landscape, and on to visit his son. But if Pachacuti's spirit exists, it may be troubled. Things in the empire are not quite working well. His grandson is finding the labor system cumbersome. And because all the royal lands are owned by mummies, he's building Quito into a second capital and pushing out the borders just to get some land for himself.
Makes sense.
And when Pachacuti last saw him, Huayna Capac asked for his advice on a strange phenomena. Pale men wearing clothing
snap.
of metal had appeared on the coast
Pizarro?
of ships, and it was said that they had brought sickness with them.
Yep.
Back in Quito, the goldsmith felt a pain.
Yeah, I think they'll probably get to this in the last episode, but the disease, like the smallpox that came over with Europeans, it hit the heart of the Inca Empire before the Spanish ever did. It traveled that fast.
Had that courier looked pale and
no.
a little more tired than he should? Strange small marks start appearing on the goldsmith's skin, some kind of pox. And with such small things, do empires fall? Special thanks to educational tier patrons Ahmed Ziad Turk, Joseph Blaine, and Gerald Spencer Dinan.
I think it's going to get bad. All right, yeah, you can see the foreshadowing there of what's going to be happening. I think most of you know about the conquistadors, what had happened in the Aztec Empire a few years before this, and then same fate's going to happen down in South America. These people are going to die of disease and other factors that brings basically the end of this empire. But some of the cool things, again, we learned today, I thought it was really neat learning about a little bit more about the dead. And again, that it was even more than I thought about. The dead are still very alive in society, in your family and all that. And I had heard, that they would bring these mummified leaders to like battles sometimes as like good fortune. And it was almost like if you were fighting, like that both sides would bring their dead leaders and you would attack and try to kind of like capture their leader. It's almost like capture the flag, but of mummified dead kings. And such an interesting concept. I don't know of a culture that had this thin of a veil between life and death in everyday life. I mean, there's a lot of cultures out there that pray to ancestors and stuff, but like they're like truly acting like these are alive people and you can consult them. And they were saying that, you like drink for them and you'd pee for them and all that stuff. I don't know if anyone's gone that far, but if you know any other cultures similar to that, I'd love to know. Like, let me know down in the comments, or let's get a discussion going over on the Discord server. We have channels for pre-Columbian Americas that you can talk with people. And it's a great lively community, over 8,000 people. You can definitely check that out. There's a link down below. Also, like their Patreon, you can support the Patreon for our community. One of the things that you get out of that was to be able to vote on videos that get featured on our channel. I try to choose about one a week that the Patreons choose. This series was chosen by patrons, for example. If that's something you'd like to do, $1 a month is what it starts at. If you want higher levels, you can get some fun gear and history stuff. But anyway, that's just if you want. But thank you so much, Chris, for being here and being a part of your own learning of history here on YouTube, because there's such good things. And I appreciate you doing that no matter what. All right, and with that, we'll see you next time. Bye.